All right. Now, our next guest is a regular on TV and in the papers, has authored books, and is known as Australia's number one bill buster and money saving expert. But he's never appeared on Australia's number one receptacle themed finance podcast until now. So now that he's finally hit the big time, it's my pleasure to welcome Zyft consumer finance expert Joel Gibson to the Savings Tip Jar. G'day, Joel. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I thought you'd never ask.
Thanks, Joel. Well, here we are. Like you've been around the traps for many years. Our focus on the consumer has intersected at many points in our three careers. But before we talk about all the cost of living stuff that Zyft can provide and all the election talk, do you have a savings tip for us?
Yeah. My savings tip is get digital. If you're not digitally savvy, it's really important that you switch on, because technology is solving so many of the problems that we have had in the past as consumers and money savers. Technology can now find you the cheapest electricity plan. It can let you know that you're not being ripped off when you buy something online. It can help you find the cheapest mortgage for your home. Used to have to do, build spreadsheets and take hours out of your own time to do that. But the technology exists. It's really just up to us now to get our head around it and work out how to, put it to use.
Good tip, Joel. Yeah, I do think I'm probably still stuck in the past a little bit. I'm a bit of an old soul. I've still got the spreadsheets and whatnot happening. But yeah, it's definitely a good tip for me. I need to embrace, particularly things like spending tracking apps. I know those could probably save me up a fair bit of time from strolling through all my list of transactions and categorizing things. But I sometimes quite like that sort of hands-on feeling. I'll certainly have a go at digital a little bit more. Now, obviously, we've just had an election. We know the result. It's a very clear result this time around. Before the election, you sort of warned of the short-term sugar hits that both candidates were proposing. Do you still feel that way? Do you still feel that under the Albanese government we won't see a fundamental addressing of the cost of living issues we're experiencing?
No, of course, I think the cost of living's been solved by this election. It was the cost of living election. Both sides are promising to solve the cost of living, and it's all going to be roses from here on in. No, I'm only joking, of course. I think we should give credit where it's due. Both sides eventually worked out that there was one and only one issue in the election. It was the cost of living stupid, as they say. Both came up with, in some cases, very similar, in some cases, quite different potential solutions to that. Do I think that they're going to solve the problem? Absolutely not. Look, a small tax cut from Labor will help. It's not going to kick in for a couple of years in full. An automatic $1,000 tax deduction at tax time, that'll be great for, a lot of people. It'll be an extra couple of $100 in their tax return. But it's not going to undo the effects of bracket creep over the past 5 or 10 years, which are thousands of dollars. It's not going to solve the fact that our insurance premiums have gone up by thousands of dollars probably over the past 5 years when you add it all up. Energy bills are up by probably, on average, around $400 over the last 5 years. And then, groceries, of course, at one point were up 10% in a year. And if you've got a mortgage, forget about it. You've had, more than a dozen rate rises in the space of 18 months. So none of those problems are going to be solved by small tax cuts. It's going to help the cost of living relief that we're being promised, the new energy rebates that are coming in the second half of this year. But it's not going to undo the damage of the last sort of 5 years, which has been really, really significant to household budgets.
Yeah, the proof is in the pudding, Joel, where you see like GDP per labour hour worked, our living standards back to where they were, 10 years ago. Why do you think that politicians are afraid to be bold nowadays? We heard that the coalition was thinking about introducing tax bracket indexation, which I think if they announced it early enough and they went hard on that might have gotten them across the line. But why do you think politicians are so afraid to be bold nowadays?
I think they've been burnt, in the past when they've taken tax reform to an election. The classic recent example is Bill Shorten trying to unwind, negative gearing and capital gains tax in the property sector. Many would say it lost in the election. So people they're just gutless. They're not prepared to go into an election with anything bold that involves picking a fight with any particular group in society. The rule when they go into an election looking for cost of living relief is it has to be something where nobody loses. And unfortunately, what they then do is they raid the public coffers for example, give us tax cuts or first home buyer promises which probably are in the long term going to raise the price of property, might maybe be counterproductive, but there's no individual that's clearly a loser from that policy in the short term. So that's where they go looking for money they can spend to kind of to bribe us, I suppose, or give us short-term solutions to the cost of living problems. The long-term problems are still there underlying, and we're not solving those long-term problems because they're just terrified of that we'll punish them for anything too bold or too radical.
Do you think, Joel, perhaps the whole cost of living crisis thing will be less of a concern for the next 3 years of government for the Albanese government, given that inflation is in the headline sense anyway, it's back within target, but and potentially with that being less of a concern, maybe there will be less protections against price surges in those sort of key areas like housing, groceries, and insurance?
Yeah, I think we've seen the worst of that particular period of sort of inflation for a few reasons. I think it was a global issue, not a local issue, and we've seen inflation come back down all around the world. It was a little bit slower to come back down in Australia, but we're now in that 2 to 3% band that the RBA likes to be in for both the headline and the underlying inflation rates. But what people forget about when we talk about inflation is that just because, for example, let's talk about insurance premiums. They were increasing by an average of 17% at one point, middle of last year. They've come back down to increasing by an average of 8% now, which looks like a win, but that's still an average 8% increase on every car and home insurance policy in the country on average in the past year. That's still a lot of extra money when every other bill is going up at the same time. So yeah, inflation's come back under control. That's fantastic. We've seen, I think, the worst of it in this phase, but we haven't undone the price rises of the past 2 years. We now have to live with that as the new normal, and some bills are still going up. And now we've got the volatility of, Trump in the White House waging trade wars against China and the rest of the world. And that's the new thing that we need to be concerned about, because that's really unpredictable in terms of what that's going to do to the cost of living.
It seems like the government wants to deliver handouts to bring down that that headline rate of inflation, at least for the short term. Maybe why don't they give a handout for insurance premiums? I don't know. But let me get into energy subsidies. We saw, I think, in the most recent inflation data that the energy component of inflation really came rocketing back because all those subsidies at a federal and state level kind of have tapered off now. What's your general take on these subsidies? Are they good, or are they just really kind of masking the real issues?
Both. I reckon that they are masking the real issues. The underlying cost of energy is very high. We just haven't noticed it for the past couple of years because they've been giving us, this year they've given everybody around the country $300 in 4 installments of 75 each. In the second half of this year, they're promising another $150. Some states have given people an extra $1,000, like in Queensland. So Queenslanders, their meter kind of almost gone backwards in the past year. But they had to do that because the cost of transitioning the energy system from the old coal and gas, particularly coal, to renewables, which is still very much a work in progress and will go on for another decade or more, is really expensive, and it's happening a lot slower than they had planned. And so they basically need to paper over the cuts in the meantime to get us over that bridge to the point where when we do build all the new poles and wires and we do have the new batteries in place and other forms of what they call firming, which is storing renewable energy or backing it up, then it will be eventually, hopefully, cheaper. But we've got years to go before we get to that point. And so they've just found a temporary Band-Aid solution for the interim.
Now, Joel, you're an ambassador for a price comparison platform known as Zyft. Now, amidst the lack of sort of price protections from governments, do you think potentially, and amongst such rapid increases in prices for the likes of things like insurance and whatnot, do you think more people will take matters into their own hands and utilize these sort of platforms to get better deals on their goods?
Yeah, I think they already are. I think people are already being forced to be more resourceful than we've ever been before. I had a conversation with someone just this morning who said she's just cancelled her NBN plan because she realised that she had, they keep putting more and more data into mobile plans. She realised she now had enough data in her mobile plan that she could use that at home and hotspot, and she's just saved herself $70 a month, right? So that's an extreme example, but I think just all these new digital tools, and other things at our disposal. People are discovering them out of necessity. It used to be that, early adopters or people who were hardcore money savers would find these things, and maybe the mainstream would take a bit longer. People are being forced now to work out, how do I find the cheapest place to buy my groceries each week, or how do I make sure I'm paying, a low price when I buy something online. And I think the beauty of it is that those tools are available to us if we go looking for them now. The developers are working their backsides off to create these things. We are now kind of discovering them probably quicker than we would have if there wasn't a cost of living crisis. So that's quite encouraging to see that. But it's unfortunate that it's taken, a massive, massive increase in the cost of living, deterioration in our living standards to make that happen. But I hope that we've, as a result, changed our money saving habits as a result, and we'll be better placed when the economy improves to spend as little as possible and make as much money as possible coming out of it.
Yeah, that's a great sort of final remark, Joel. I mean, the last couple of years has made a lot of people feel uncomfortable, and in uncomfortability forces action. So, but like linking back to your savings tip of going digital, I don't think it helps my 94-year-old grandfather who still uses a passbook and goes down to the bank every week to settle a ledger. But nonetheless, thanks so much for your time on the Savings Tip Jar podcast, Joel.
Yeah, thanks, Harrison. I'm acutely conscious of that. I was in the post office yesterday and people were in there still paying their bills in the post office.
My God.
So, unfortunately, a lot of people are just left behind at the moment. And maybe we should be helping our parents and grandparents, to do those things and use those tools. That might be a good idea.
Certainly.
Thanks so much, Joel. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.